I've got something incredible for you today on Behind the Billions, and I can't wait to dive in.
Oh my gosh, yes. You know what? I've been absolutely dying to cover this story because it's just incredible. We're talking about Amancio Ortega, and I mean this is the guy behind Zara, that store we all basically live in.
So he's like really, really wealthy, right? I mean, we're talking billions here.
Oh, you have no idea. Like we're talking about someone who's literally the second wealthiest person in Europe right now with, and get this, a net worth of about $134 billion. And the crazy thing is he started as just, a regular shop worker.
Wait, seriously? How does someone even...
Right? Like that's what makes this story so absolutely fascinating. We're talking about a guy who, started by basically making clothes by hand. And now he's built this absolute empire. And trust me, the way he did it is just, it's mind blowing.
I feel like our listeners are really going to love this one.
Oh, they totally will. Because like, this isn't just about money. You know what I mean? It's about someone who completely changed how we shop, how fashion works, and just revolutionized the entire retail industry.
So, let's start at the beginning. Where did Amancio actually come from?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is actually really interesting because like he came from super humble beginnings, right? He was born in this tiny place called Busdongo de Arbas in Spain, and he was actually the youngest of four kids.
What was life like for him growing up?
So, his dad was actually a railway worker and the family wasn't well off at all. They lived in Tolosa, which is this small town in northern Spain, and things were pretty basic. But here's where it gets really interesting. Like at just 14 years old, can you believe that? He had to leave school.
That's really young. What happened?
Right? So his family moved to this city called A Coruna because of his dad's job. And this is where things start getting really fascinating because, instead of continuing his education, he actually started working at this local shirt maker's shop called Gala. And get this, that shop, it's still there like on the exact same corner in downtown A Coruna.
So this was his first exposure to fashion then?
Exactly. And this is where he really started learning everything from the ground up. Like he wasn't just working as a shop assistant, you know what I mean? He was actually learning how to make clothes by hand. And this is what's so incredible about his story. He was literally learning the basics of what would later become this massive fashion empire.
What kind of skills was he picking up there?
So he was learning absolutely everything about clothes making, like the detailed stuff, how to cut fabric, how to sew, understanding different materials. And most importantly, he was learning about what customers actually wanted. You know what I mean? He was right there on the shop floor, seeing exactly what people were looking for and how they shopped.
So, after learning all these skills at Gala, what was his first real business venture?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is where it gets really interesting. In 1963, right? He started this company called Confecciones Goa. And you know what they made? Quilted bathrobes. Like it wasn't exactly high fashion, but it was his first real step into making his own products.
What made him decide to take that leap?
So, he had this incredible understanding of like how clothes were made and what people wanted, right? And I think he just saw this opportunity to create something that was actually affordable for regular people. But the really big moment, like the absolute game changer, came in 1975 when he and his wife Rosalia opened the very first Zara store.
Tell me more about that first store.
So, right, the first Zara was nothing like what we see today, but it had this amazing concept that totally changed everything. Like they were focused on making trendy clothes really quickly and selling them at prices that normal people could actually afford. And get this, the store was such a hit that they just kept opening more and more locations.
How did it grow from there?
So this is where it gets really, really incredible. The business just kept expanding and eventually all these different brands came together under this thing called the Inditex Group. We're talking about huge names now like Massimo Dutti, Bershka, Pull&Bear. And you know what's absolutely mind-blowing? By 2009, they had over 92,000 employees and more than 6,000 stores.
That's a massive operation. How much of it did Ortega own?
Right. So at that point, he owned like 59% of the entire group, which is it's just incredible when you think about it. And the really fascinating thing is how they managed to keep this sort of like fast fashion philosophy, even as they got bigger and bigger. You know what I mean? They never lost that original vision of making fashion accessible to everyone.
So, what exactly made Zara so different from other clothing stores at the time?
Oh man, this is where Ortega was just absolutely brilliant. Like the whole fast fashion concept that we know today, he basically invented it. You see, traditional fashion brands, right? They would plan their collections like a year in advance, but Zara, they completely turned that model on its head.
How did they manage to do that?
So, okay, the genius part was that they created this incredibly responsive system. Like they could take a design from concept to store shelves in just 2 weeks. And you know what's really amazing? They were constantly watching what customers wanted. If something was selling really well, boom, they'd make more of it right away.
That must have required some pretty impressive logistics.
Oh my gosh, yes. The logistics were just just mind-blowing. They built this massive distribution system centered in Spain, right? And and every single store worldwide would get new merchandise twice a week. Can you believe that? Like, while other brands were stuck with the same old inventory, Zara was constantly bringing in fresh styles.
Were there any other innovations that set them apart?
So many. Like, they basically created this whole concept of artificial scarcity. You know how you go to Zara and if you see something you like, you better buy it right away because it might not be there tomorrow. That was totally intentional. And and they were really smart about their production too. Instead of making huge batches of everything, they do these smaller runs, which meant less waste and it actually created this sense of exclusivity.
That's fascinating. How did other retailers react to this new approach?
Right. So at first they were like totally skeptical, you know. But then they saw how successful it was and everyone started trying to copy the model. But Zara had such a head start and they'd perfected this whole system of design, production, and distribution that was just really hard to replicate. And the crazy thing is, they did all this without any advertising, like zero traditional marketing. They let their clothes and their stores do all the talking.
So, let's talk about what all this success actually means in terms of numbers. Like, how wealthy has this made Ortega?
Oh my goodness, the numbers are just absolutely mind-blowing. Like as of 2024, right? His net worth is sitting at around $134 billion. And you know what's really crazy? He's actually the second wealthiest person in Europe, right behind Bernard Arnault.
That's an incredible amount of money.
It totally is. And what's super interesting is that he's built this whole separate empire through his company, Pontegadea. Like, we're not just talking about fashion anymore. This is serious real estate power. The company's property holdings alone are worth, get this, over $17 billion.
What kind of properties are we talking about?
So they've got this amazing portfolio of really prestigious properties. Like they own the Hawkwut building in Manhattan and the Southeast Financial Center. And you know what's really interesting? They recently bought this complex in Seattle where Amazon has its headquarters. They're constantly making these huge deals, like the $72.5 million deal for a downtown Chicago hotel.
Has his wealth been affected by recent global events?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like during the pandemic, he actually lost about $10 billion. But here's the thing that's really fascinating about Ortega's wealth. He's still the largest shareholder of Inditex, owning like 60 to 65% of the company. And through Pontegadea, he's been diversifying into energy companies too. Like they bought 5% of Enagas for about 281 million euros and similar stakes in other energy companies.
These numbers are just staggering.
Right. And you know what's really interesting about how he manages all this wealth? It's all super strategic. Like in Madrid and Barcelona alone, they've got these prime properties on all the major business streets. And they've expanded this real estate empire to like 5 other European capitals: Paris, Berlin, Rome, Lisbon, and London. It's just absolutely incredible how they've built this whole separate business empire alongside the fashion retail success.
You know what I find really fascinating? For someone with this much wealth and influence, we barely know anything about him personally. Like, how is that even possible in today's world?
Oh my goodness, yes. Like, this is actually one of the most remarkable things about Ortega. You know what's crazy? Up until 1999, there wasn't even a single published photograph of him. And get this, he's only ever given 3 interviews to journalists in his entire life.
That's incredibly private for such a prominent figure.
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating is his lifestyle. Like, you'd expect someone worth over $100 billion to be living this super luxurious, flashy life, right? But Ortega is just completely different. He actually lives in this apartment in A Coruña, Spain with his wife, Flora. And you know what's really interesting about him? He has this very specific way of dressing.
What do you mean?
So he's got this kind of personal uniform that he wears all the time. It's super simple. Just a blue blazer, white shirt, and gray trousers. And here's the kicker. None of it is even from Zara. And he absolutely refuses to wear ties. Like, this is the founder of one of the biggest fashion empires in the world, and he's just totally uninterested in flashy clothes.
Tell me about his personal life. Has he been married?
Yes, actually, he's been married twice. His first marriage was to Rosalia Mera in 1966, and they had 2 children together, Sandra and Marcos. But they divorced in 1986. And then in 2001, he married Flora Perez Marcote, with whom he actually had a daughter, Marta, back in 1984.
Does he have any indulgences at all?
Well, he does own 2 yachts called Drizzle and Valoria B, and he's got a Gulfstream G650 jet. But compared to other billionaires, he's really quite modest. It's like he's just never let the money change who he is at his core. You know what I mean?
Speaking of his impact, I've heard he's done some pretty significant charitable work. What can you tell me about that?
Oh my goodness, yes. Like, this is actually one of the most incredible parts of his story. So in 2017, he made this absolutely massive donation of 300 million euros to fight cancer across Spain. And and what's really amazing is how practical and impactful this donation was.
What did they do with the money?
So they used it to buy these specialized machines, right? Like 440 machines specifically for detecting cancer. And and what's really incredible is that before this donation, only about 20 Spanish public hospitals had these special stereotactic radiotherapy machines. But after Ortega's contribution, that number jumped to 70 hospitals.
That's a huge difference.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting? He's actually been recognized for his charitable work. Like the Spanish Association of Foundations gave him this award in 2017 for his philanthropic initiatives. And back in 2012, he donated about 20 million euros to this organization called Caritas Internationalis, which is like it's like this major Catholic relief organization.
Has there been any criticism of his charitable giving?
Well, actually, yes, some political parties like Podemos, they've been pretty critical of his donations. But you know what's really fascinating about Ortega's legacy? It's not just about the money or the charity. Like he completely transformed the fashion industry with this concept of fast fashion. He basically created this whole new way of thinking about how we make and sell clothes.
In what way?
So he pioneered this system where you can take what's trending on the runways and get it into stores super quickly, like in weeks instead of months. And this model has just completely changed how the entire fashion industry operates. Like he's not just a successful businessman, he's literally reshaped how the whole industry works. You know what I mean?
So, when you look at Amancio Ortega's whole story, it's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, it really, really is. Like just think about it. This is someone who started as a shop hand, right? Making clothes by hand in this tiny store in Spain. And now he's created this absolutely massive global empire with Zara and all these other incredible brands.
What do you think made him so successful?
You know what's fascinating? It's this combination of things. First, there's his incredible work ethic, right? And then there's his amazing ability to just understand what customers want. But I think what's really, really remarkable is how he's stayed true to himself through all of this success.
Yeah, like still wearing that same simple outfit.
Exactly. Like here's this man who could literally wear anything in the world, and he sticks to his blue blazer and gray trousers. And you know what's even more amazing? He's still living in that same apartment in A Coruna, still keeping that low profile, still focusing on what made him successful in the first place.
Well, that's all we have time for on this episode of Behind the Billions. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks for letting me share this absolutely incredible story. Like it just shows that with enough determination and innovation, you can really create something extraordinary. You know what I mean?